Welcome to Coffee Talk. I'm Brad Barnett with the Kerrville Area Chamber of Commerce. One of the big economic drivers in Texas, and especially in the Hill Country over the past decade or so, has been what's referred to as craft ag, which is production of things like craft beer and wineries. So we have Kelly with us from Kerrville Hills Winery.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Kind of talk a little bit about why the wine industry is so important to Kerrville and the Hill Country.
The wine industry in Texas actually started like back in the 70s. If John was here, he could give you better dates. But many people knew the wine industry, the Texas wine industry, for being very different. And we, over time, Texas, with all of our land, have found that it is more profitable and more sustainable to go grapes as opposed to maybe some other agriculture. And so you just naturally kind of saw that pop up. Fredericksburg, 20 years ago, had a couple of very, it's a beautiful place to be. Mm-hmm. It's in the Texas Hill Country, and so you found a couple of wineries popping up in the Hill Country, and that has since grown exponentially. I am a board member for Texas Hill Country Wineries, and we have 62-ish members right now, and we have a waiting list of people wanting to get in and inquiring about being part of it. And so the Texas wine industry as a whole is a $20 billion industry. And so a $20 billion industry is not going to go away very quickly. Yeah. And so we are working at Kerrville Hills Winery about how to authenticate Texas wine. We do have a lot of lateral ability whenever it comes to alcohol and production, so you'll find a little bit of differences between each type of spirit. Beer has different laws than spirits, or liquor, which has different laws than wine. Wine just got very lucky, and we have a lot of liberty of how we can move and who we can sell to and stuff like that. And I think that that's why it was able to grow so quickly. But as you know, we do like having liberties in our business that also opened us up for outside influences. And so at Kerrville Hills Winery, and for many wineries, we're really working toward making sure that wine that is marketed as Texas wine is 100% Texas wine. And part of that we've realized, well, you can't stop something from happening, you can always educate people. So we are working really hard to educate customers of what to look for to see if the wine that you're drinking is 100% Texas wine. And just recently, it was passed just 2 years ago that how you label is in a specific way to where people can better understand what is in their wine. So now for it to be considered for you to put an AVA and so a placement of where those grapes were grown, that's called an AVA. And to be able to put Texas High Plains or Texas Hill Country, it has to be 100% fruit from Texas to be able to designate that specifically. Okay. And then you have to have, I think it is like 95% of the fruit has to be from that specific vineyard if you're going to put a vineyard designate. And we work very hard to put a vineyard designate with the majority of our wines, because our philosophy really is to highlight not just us as winemakers, but also our growers and where grapes are being grown and who's doing a great job of growing their grapes. So we like to give those people homage and like to put them on the labels.
Well, and I know that you guys have a passion at Kerrville Hills for really giving back. One of the things I know y'all have, I don't know if you really considered an incubator program for future winemakers, but talk a little bit about what you guys are doing to grow the next generation.
So that came very, I guess you could say, accidentally in 2020. John and I were sitting around probably in April, so things had just been shut down, and you're kind of looking at each other wondering, like, well, what are we going to do now? And John had been a consultant. He had started another winery many years ago, had then moved to consulting, had started multiple brands just as a consultant. Then whenever the opportunity came to purchase Kerrville Hills Winery, he was excited to start on his own brand again and to kind of get his name out there. But then whenever your tasting room shut down, it's hard to get your name out there. But people were still calling him to consult. And I think 2020 also, people who were in jobs, even higher level jobs, they were kind of looking at what's next in their life towards retirement. And we just started getting a lot of calls about, well, will you consult? Well, maybe, kind of, I don't know. And John had always referenced back to an incubator program that they have in Washington. And he said how much he liked that it was a shared use space, and that it was very collaborative and very, you had like one main person who would kind of guide everyone. And this is going to be John's 17th harvest. So he's been doing this now for 17 years. And so whenever people would call to ask to consult, we would just say, what do you think about a shared use facility with all these other benefits too? And we kind of guide your hand. It's not just consulting here or there. Like, you get to come use our facility. We'll show you, like, piece by piece, like how to do this, how to start your vineyard, how to start your brand, how to, we'll be part of your construction process. We can help you lay out things, because as John says, he's already made all the mistakes and spent all the money on making those mistakes. So we kind of help people to not hit as many of those pitfalls that they might see. So right now, I think we fluctuate with how many incubator members we have, just because everyone's in different parts of their incubation. So an incubator, there are a few clients who will probably stay with us for long term, just because John might be their head winemaker of notoriety. But the majority of our incubator clients, it's like they're baby birds. You sit them and then they fly off. And so Abastris is, I guess we can call that the first incubator client. It was his first client whenever he was a consultant. Then whenever he bought Kerrville Hills Winery, they used our shared use space, and now they just finished their own production facility. So they are officially their own full adult bird flying off.
And that's always neat. Well, and speaking of growing that next generation, pun intended, but I know you are partnering with Schreiner University.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
And one of the things Schreiner really, I think, does well is, they have the Trailhead Beer Garden, and I think being a private university gives them a little more leeway to really lean into the craft ag, which is, again, huge in the Hill Country.
Yes. Yeah. Schreiner University came to us probably about a year and a half ago, and they were just interested in having lunch with John and I just to talk about, Kerrville, where did we come from? I grew up in Kerrville, but where are we from? How do we get into the business? And also, where do we see the business going? And kind of what are our biggest needs? So we had this lunch. It was a really great lunch. Got to meet with the president and a bunch of higher ups there at the university. And at the end of it, I looked at John and I said, I felt like we were just on a date and they were trying to court us. And he said, I had the same feeling too. And so a couple of weeks later, they called and they said, well, we're looking at kind of pivoting what we offer, because this was also still in the midst of the pandemic. I think this might have been December of 2020 or something. So they were noticing, the universities are noticing a shift in students, what students are looking for. Not all of them are looking for 4-year degrees. They're noticing that online school is kind of perking up. And so they were trying to figure out where do we as a university mesh what industries are actually looking for with what students are looking for. And they've kind of landed on these 1 and 2 year certificate programs. And so I know that they're working with like Killdeer, and I know that they're working with Mooney and Flight School. And so we are going to be part of their craft agriculture certificate, 1 and 2 year certificate program. We're looking to start in the spring of 2024. So we are going to be putting together all of that, what that certificate and what that looks like. And they have really been great about asking us and letting us be the leads, since we're kind of the experts, as some people put it. And so we have installed a 5-acre vineyard up at Shriner, and the community was amazing. A lot of people came out to help with the planting, and many people are really excited about that. And so now the next step is starting the certificate program and getting those students in and having them use the vineyard as their classroom, because once they have that certificate, that's what they will be doing. They will be working in the vineyard. And so we need a workforce that already understands how to work vineyards. They understand the cycles of growing. They understand what to do, like what you can and can't do whenever it's windy, or if it just rained or is about to rain, all these different things. And we can teach them how to do these things in a practical manner, as opposed to just reading it in a textbook, but a very practical manner, and a useful manner that can also help with sustainability. Whenever you understand the cycles of weather and patterns and stuff like that, then you can also understand how to make less pass-throughs in a vineyard, or don't spray this yet because it's about to rain, so just wait after the rain and then only use these types of sprays. And so while we understand some people work towards organic, we work more towards sustainability and just understanding the cycles, and understanding that also the prettiest vineyard may not be the most fruitful or highest yielding vineyard. We like, as John puts it, the scruffy vineyard theory. For instance, with hail, like we get these pop-up hailstorms that no one saw coming. Well, you can put up hail netting and keep that up, but then you have some issues with breeze getting through, and then you can get rot because too much moisture. Okay. So there are pros and cons to having the hail netting up, or sometimes you don't have it up and it's sitting on the ground and then it gets hailed to the ground. So what John prefers to do is have the scruffy vineyard and allow the vines to the foliage to kind of protect its own grapes. So our vineyards may not always be the most pristine, but it's for a purpose type of thing. And so these are things that we can teach people that are going to go into the industry, so that they understand, why maybe you don't cut back so far, or maybe why you don't want to cut it so clean. Or the biggest thing that we see is people who use weed eaters in the vineyard. If you nick the bottom of the vine, that's going to cause crown gall, which is basically where it hardens over itself and can choke out its ability. Oh, wow. Yeah, and so many people don't think it. They think, oh, I just nicked it, not a big deal. But if you nick it a bunch of times, it's going to stop its production because it doesn't have a vascular system anymore. So just learning very simple things like don't weed eat type of things.
Well, it sounds like really, I think for craft ag and especially for the wine industry, it's art and science.
Very much so. Hand in hand. Yeah, and that's really I guess part of our philosophy is understanding the science is one thing, and having a passion for wine and what you want the wine to taste like is another thing. But learning that balance of, I understand what my numbers say, but what does the wine taste like? And so we'll say that a lot of times. And so one thing that people at the beginning of getting into this, they get very caught up in the numbers, because whenever they go to their enology class, so winemaking class, they talk a lot about numbers and where you're supposed to pick and this, that, or the other. So you become number bombarded. But sometimes we just tell them, stop and taste it. How does the fruit taste? How does the wine taste? Like, don't get mixed up. Just because your red wine might only be, 12.5, 13% alcohol doesn't mean that it's not a good red wine. It doesn't necessarily have to mimic this whole, high alcohol wine. So we're kind of in the training process of teaching people how to just stop and to just think about it real quick. Like, what are you looking for in your wine as a winemaker? Or what are you trying to fulfill? Or how does it taste? Even though that this cab isn't going to taste at what a cab would taste like from Napa or from California, and that is perfectly fine. A Cabernet in Europe doesn't taste the same. A Chardonnay from France doesn't taste the same as a Chardonnay from California, and that is perfectly fine. And we're trying to educate our incubator members and also our customers of understanding that wine is, first of all, winemaking is farming, so it is not perfect. And secondly, it is stylistic. And third, it's supposed to be a conversation starter, and it's supposed to be something enjoyed. And it's supposed to be something that brings people together. So we try to slow down our tastings. We try to have more conversations with people. They don't have to be high level like Psalm 3. What was the terroir of, this one vineyard in 2012 type of thing. But just to have conversations. I always equate wines to memories. And so there was a wine the other day that we tried that was a Sangiovese, and I texted John. I hadn't tasted it yet, and we were serving it to our wine club, and I tasted it, and I texted him and I said, "Oh my God, I'm back in Italy. You did a great job." And he was like, "Yes, I did exactly what I was supposed to." And so it's not always about like, well, I taste the whatever, that's so obscure that only like a psalm would know. Wine doesn't have to be like that. Wine can be for everyone.
Well, and I always encourage people, why I tend to gravitate toward craft beer or bourbon. The most enjoyment I've had with wine is going to a wine pairing with food.
Mm-hmm.
So really just encouraging people to experiment a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about almost kind of some people that are, I guess, a wine snob.
Mm-hmm.
We have hosted several blind bourbon tastings at our house. And what is funny is we've done like a Buffalo Trace, and so we've had Blanton's in there, and Blanton's is kind of the hipster. It's $500 a bottle if you can get it, and we came across one a lot cheaper. And when you do 5 or 6 blind, that's come out at the bottom every time. So I would really encourage people, if you think, okay, well, it's a Texas wine, it has to be California or something from Europe, give it a try, because I almost guarantee you're going to be surprised.
Yes.
Pleasantly.
And yes, pleasantly surprised. Texas wine, and that is one thing that we hear a lot, is like, Texas wine is so different. It used to be all sweet wines. Yes, I get that, and that is what it used to be. But the Texas wine industry has and is still working on moving into its own and trying to figure out. Everyone keeps wanting to pigeonhole us into like, well, what's the Texas varietal? And I'm kind of happy that we don't have a varietal, because if you look at kind of what it's done to California, there have been some winemakers in California that are very jealous of what we're able to do here in Texas, because literally the world is our oyster. We're still working out like which varietals grow best in high plains versus hill country. And so we have so many different elevations and terroirs and little microclimates that even in the hill country, a varietal at this certain area may not grow well, but then all of a sudden on the outskirts of our AVA or maybe out in Mason, it grows fantastic. And so it's all about it. So there's so many different factors that can go into the success of the vines. And so I think that it's really neat that people can come out and they're getting to see that there is something besides Cabernet and Chardonnay out in the world, and even Pinot Noir. And I'm I'm happy that, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of different varietals out there, and there's new varietals that we're learning of all the time. Like Beurre is one that we just put in at Shriner, and no one else has Beurre here in Texas. And so it was very close to another varietal we were looking at getting, but we weren't able to get that varietal. And so John was like, okay, I think that this will do well in the hill country and Rocky. Like, I've done a lot of research. I think it's going to do well. And we're super excited. And we feel like the university was the perfect place to do a test for it. So fingers crossed about that one.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you being here. Is there anything really you would want to tell people that are watching that we haven't touched on? Obviously encouraging them to come out to Kerrville.
Yeah, come out to Kerrville Hills Winery. We are located at 3600 Fredericksburg Road, so going up on 16 towards Fredericksburg past I-10 on the left-hand side. We are open Thursday through Sunday, and we would love to have any and everyone up there. Really, you don't have to know anything about wine. Just come out, sit down, ask any of our staff, ask them what they like, or tell them kind of your experience with wine. And we are really good at guiding people through a tasting that best works for them and what they're looking for. So yeah, I encourage you to drink Texas wine, and I encourage you to come out to Kerrville Hills Winery.
All right, Kelly, thanks so much for being here today. Joining us next time for the next episode of Coffee Talk.